I'm going to start talking about partially observable worlds. If you remember from our robot picture many weeks back, it had effectors which correspond to actions. Those actions can be deterministic, which is what normal planning, strips planning is. In the context of atomic states, if your actions are deterministic, then you essentially do search in the space of states, direct graph search. In the case of, and then if you have stochastic actions, then we did MDPs, which basically we are talking in terms of policies, looking directly in terms of policies and value functions. But in doing all of that, we sort of assumed that the state is known to the robot when the agent when it gets into a state. Okay, so you may not know when you are in state as 0 and you're about to do an action A, you may not be able to simulate exactly what state will occur after the action. But once that state actually occurs, you just open your eyes, you know exactly which state occurred. That was a huge, big plus point. Okay. So that was the fully observable scenario. So we assumed perfect sensing, and then we looked at deterministic as well as stochastic actions till now. Okay. Now we go to the other side. So in fact, you can sort of think of, I should have probably drawn it there, but you can think of many different dimensions. This dimension is action determinism. This is actions. Okay, the actions can be deterministic, non-deterministic, stochastic. Okay, non-deterministic essentially means when you do this action, multiple states will occur. You don't quite know what probability for what state. Actually, in fact, I should write it the opposite. Because in terms of the knowledge about the next state, here you have full knowledge because when you are in a state, you do the action, you know exactly what the next state will be. Stochastic, you have probabilistic knowledge about what the next state is going to be. Okay, and then non-deterministic. Non-deterministic means you know what states will occur, but you don't necessarily know what probabilities are associated with those states. Okay, notice that stochastic as well as non-deterministic, for example, can tell you that when you do this action, you can get into any of the states of the world. Okay, in which case you have no real clue when you do the action that which state actually will happen. So that's like total uncertainty. Okay, but non-determinism will tell you that you'll get into any of the states. I have no clue what is the probability of any of them occurring. So the distribution can be any one of the infinitely many distributions. Stochastic one is telling you not only that you will get into these states, here is the distribution that you will have of the states. That's more knowledge. It doesn't look like you have more knowledge, but it is more knowledge. Okay? So the interesting thing actually is this, as you go from this side to this side, it's a knowledge. Reducing, disappearing. Okay. Now the interesting thing actually is if you just consider with respect to these, actually there is something coming out of the. So if you just consider with respect to deterministic, stochastic, and non-deterministic actions, everything else remaining constant. Okay. What would you have said is the easiest case to do decision making? What would you have said is the hardest case? What would you have said is the in-between case? So, but for now actually I'll remove these dimensions and I just put for now the y-axis is difficulty of decision making. Okay, and then I'll put another, using my Excel hat, I'll also put one more y-axis here. And that is probability of success in such a world. Okay, probability of success in such a world. So first let's talk about probability of success. This is actually a repetition of some things that I said in the beginning of the semester. Now it's come back to, we can talk about it more specific, with more specifics. So which world would have more probability of success? Deterministic has the highest probability of success, and then stochastic, then non-deterministic. Okay, so I would think that the probability of success sort of goes like that. Okay, I mean that's not exactly a scientifically drawn curve, but that's a qualitatively, that's the probability of success. So if on the other hand, we're talking about the difficulty of decision making, deciding, how much time you have to think before you can come up with the optimal policy that will give you that success. You see what I'm saying? This thing says if you actually have a brain and you can use it to make plans and you do the optimal amount of planning, you're saying if you're in a non-deterministic world, your success can still be quite low. And this one is saying it can be quite high. Okay, but the amount of time taken for decision making, that's a different issue. In the case of deterministic scenarios, it's actually search in the space of, in an atomic level, it's just a graph. Here is S1, here is S2, here is S3, and then maybe this is G, and then one more thing here. And so you're just finding a path from S1 to G, and then executing it. Right? It's just graph search. Okay? Now for non-deterministic, we didn't actually talk about it, but hopefully you read the section that I asked you to read, but not only that, but you also read the section before that, which talked about non-deterministic actions. In the case of non-deterministic actions, what you have, you start, let's say, with S0, and you do action A1, then you may get one of two states, S1 or S2. So it sort of becomes an and/or search. Okay, it's slightly higher. We'll actually look into more details about this. We can actually view this as belief state search. Also, actually, there's no reason to talk about belief state search. It's just and/or graph, because you know exactly what state you are in when you open your eyes. But when you are simulating, you don't know which of the states will actually occur. So you have to consider, if I were to do this action A1, I can either go into S1 or S2. Let's say it turns out S2 is goal. So when I do action A1, I can either go into goal or go into some other state. I can't just say, I'm done. Because when I do this action, I can get into goal. Can get into goal means it's weakly successful. Only sometimes it is successful. I want to say, I will get into goal. To do that, what will I do? I'll say, well, I'll do action A1. I'll get into A state during the execution. It will be either this or this. But I have eyes. I open my eyes. I know whether there's a goal or not. If I'm in goal, I stop. If not, I'm in S1. Right? So I should have a plan to do what to do when I'm in S1. Maybe there is another action called A2, which if you do in S1, okay, will get me to goal. Okay, that's how you plan in, when you have non-deterministic actions and full observability, you will use plans of this type, which basically says A1, semicolon, if G, stop, if not, A2. That's the plan. Previously, a plan for deterministic scenarios will be just a line. Do A1, then do A2, then you do A3, then do A4, then do A5. Okay, here it's a tree-shaped plan. It's a conditional plan. Right? That's what you will compute. Okay, clearly computing this is likely to be harder than just finding a path in the graph. So in some sense, it's kind of higher complexity. What's interesting is what happens in the stochastic case. So I just told you how to deal with non-deterministic search. We didn't actually go into it in any specific depth, but really non-deterministic is a special case of stochastic. Right? Okay, so in some sense actually, did we do conditional plans for MDPs? Yes. Are policies conditional plans? Yeah. Right? Policies are conditional plans. They basically tell you what to do in the current state. And then essentially you will get into some state based on that, and then you will know what to do from there because I have told you what to do for each of the states. And conditional plans are just partial policies. They're only telling you that you will only reach certain amount of some of the states, and when you go to those states, you know what to do. If you get into a state which is not covered by the plan, bad luck. You must have had a bad model, and then you essentially did not plan for an eventuality. Okay, so the thing is, so non-deterministic is higher, stochastic is basically we searched in the space of full policies. In some sense, conceptually, I would say it's harder, so something like that. I don't know if I should do that, but definitely at stochastic it's higher and non-deterministic it's lower. Part of the trick in understanding this actually is for non-deterministic case, there may be many problems for which there is no solution. There is no strong solution because I told you a weak solution is one where once in a while it will go into the goal. Okay? A strong solution is one where it will always go into a goal state. Right? If I am considering only non-determinism, then basically, and I can only differentiate between two kinds of plans. Plan 1, which is strong, that means it will always get me to the goal. Plan 2, which, and the second class of plans which are weak, that means they sometimes get me to the goal. Among the weak plans, there can be plans which will get you to the goal 99.9999999% of the time, as well as plans that will get you to the goal 0.00001% of the time. But you don't know which is which because it's non-deterministic. You think both are equal. So the entire set of plans are just split into two pieces, ones which are weak, ones which are strong. And for many problems, they may not even be strong plans. Do you see what I'm saying? And so basically, then in those cases, non-deterministic planners can declare failure and leave. And they would actually be right. They can say, no, there is no such solution. And they will actually be right. These four guys, on the other hand, have to come up with, the stochastic guys, on the other hand, have to come up with the policy that is the optimal one. Or I might put a threshold and say, get me a plan that will get me to the goal state with greater than 0.7 probability. That's not obvious that it doesn't exist. You see what I'm saying? So you need to struggle to get the optimum here. Here, it basically, all plans are sort of equal. They're either non-deterministic or, they're either strong or weak. And if there's no strong plan, then you can say, I'm done. Okay, so this is something that I have mentioned, in the past, and will come up again today, actually. When you have more knowledge, you actually have a harder decision problem. There is like a phase transition, okay? Too much knowledge, easy decision problem. Too little knowledge, easy decision problem. In between knowledge, life is hard. Because when I give you the probabilities, you ignore them, then I get to say, you are not using your brain. If I didn't give you the probabilities, then it doesn't matter whether you had the brain and didn't use it or didn't have the brain to begin with. I can't tell the difference. Do you see what I'm saying? And in fact, we'll see in terms of complexity-wise too, these things actually hold. So, for example, these plans, for goal-based planners, for the deterministic case, it is p-space hard, and for stochastic case also it's actually p-space hard, and non-deterministic also p-space hard, stochastic case is harder. And then we will actually see specific details for the one with when you throw in partial observability. Okay, so this in some sense these are harder algorithms, more because you have extra knowledge, you are supposed to use it, and so it kind of makes your decision making harder. Yes.
So in non-deterministic, do we know that from state S0 we can go to this much states?
Yeah, I can say. I mean, both of them they will. So there are different kinds of non-determinism. Non-determinism which will tell you that here is only this subset of states you will go to. So that means they are splitting it into greater than 0 probability or 0 probability. So non-deterministic essentially is saying, it's taking a stochastic distribution and then basically saying any state which has 0 probability, I'll just remove from the set. Everything else, I just put it in the set. And I won't tell you the probabilities of those states.
So we can say that it is 1 divided by the number of states it can go into.
Well, that is, you can do that. If you do that, then essentially that's just, first of all, again, that's a very reasonable point, but I just want you to understand that's not always right. Okay, so he's just saying that if you don't know the distribution over n states, just assume uniform distribution. 1 divided by number means the uniform distribution. Okay, first of all, that's just your assumption. I didn't tell you that is the case. Do you see what I'm saying? And when I don't give you knowledge, you make up your own knowledge. I can't be sure whether that was right or wrong. So in particular, suppose I have states S1 to Sn here, and what I had was some sort of a bimodal distribution, and you just came up with this. Okay, you would not be able to capture the kind of dynamics I had in mind.
But still the policy that will be achieved at the end of the day will be optimal because I will be taking all the rewards.
No, it's just you're talking about bounds. You're talking about bounds. Mm-hmm. Okay. The only possible reason to make this is essentially the uniform distribution is the high entropy distribution. Of all the distributions, that is the one for discrete case. That's the one that makes the least amount of assumption about the data. Yeah. Okay. People try to do that, but you need to understand at a theoretical level, not having knowledge versus making an assumption about what the knowledge is. Yeah. This is an operational detail. Okay? So just because I didn't tell you something doesn't mean it's uniform. I didn't tell you this. I'm not telling you right now. Okay? Whereas stochastic, I would tell you exactly what the distribution is, and there is no ifs and buts. Okay? But making uniform distribution, in some cases you might be able to give you bounds, but in general, when I didn't give you knowledge, I can't expect you to give me guaranteed plans that will reach certain level of satisfaction, unless that level of satisfaction is 1.0. This is the interesting part, okay? So I may be able to, for example, in this scenario, if I ever reach S1, apparently there is a deterministic action that will get me to the goal. But from S0, I only had a non-deterministic action which might either take me to the goal or take me to S1. In this case, even though I had non-deterministic actions, there is a plan with 1.0 probability.
Yes.
1.0 I can ask. I can't say give me a plan that has at least 0.75 probability. Unless you give me one, you will not be able to satisfy me. Yes?
So given a non-deterministic domain, are we saying that we don't have the model, or are we saying that there is no model, that everything is chaos, essentially?
I did not, you the agent does not have the model.
So it would be reasonable in an ergodic domain to actually try and learn.
Exactly. That's completely reasonable. That's completely reasonable. So you want, the learning is supposed to take you this way. Learning is supposed to take you this way. But you would be wondering, why the heck did I learn when you passed through this middle point? Because your life became harder in terms of decision making. Did you see what I'm saying? I mean, it's like, why did I learn? Why did I not just not open my mouth and just go with non-deterministic? Nobody expected much miracles from me, and I could fail, and nobody would complain. By mistake I learned, now because I learned, I'm being charged. So the gift of genius. Sorry, the duty of genius. Because you're a genius and you learned the model, now you have to use it. Otherwise, I'll say you're a lazy bum. You see what I'm saying? But that's a good point to understand. It's a very interesting qualitative point that yes, indeed, that you are supposed to go this way. But it's also the case that as you're going from here to here, you will get to a point where your decision-making life becomes harder. Okay. Any other questions on this?
And crossing this point is very difficult because we won't be ever able to learn the whole model.
Yeah, you'll never be able to get fully deterministic model unless somebody just gives it to you free. Okay. Okay, so that's fine. Now I'm going to remove all this and I'll play this game that the x-axis is just one dimension and then I have another dimension. We actually already looked at this other dimension too. And I just put it this way because I want to put the other one different. So this is the z-axis, this is the x-axis, this is the z-axis. And the z-axis essentially said these are about goals, okay? And this is classical goals, that means full satisfaction. Full satisfaction goals, that means all the goals must be satisfied, which is what normal classical planning is, okay? And then you can have partial satisfaction, which means I give you a whole bunch of goals. Each of these goals have different types of rewards. You decide how many of these goals you're going to satisfy. Like I tell you, these are all the homework, these are all the forum things that you should do, these are all the papers that you should read. You decide how many of them you do based on, you know, your other life commitments. It's not like if you don't do all of them, you just directly fail. All of the full satisfaction means if you don't do one of the things I asked you to do, you fail. You know, I'm sure you've taken courses, especially undergrads may have taken courses where they'll say, this lab, if you don't do this lab, you won't pass this course. Even though the lab, if you do it, it's only 10% of your grade. But if you don't do it, you'll just fail the course. So I made that essentially all or nothing. If you don't do that goal, then you'll get a huge penalty. Okay, so that's full satisfaction, that's partial satisfaction, and then basically we also considered, you know, reward metrics. Where there is no goal, essentially all states will give you different rewards, and you come up with a plan that sort of optimizes the total amount of reward you get. In some sense, these are probably closer to each other. Partial satisfaction and reward metrics are very close to each other. Classical planning looked at full satisfaction problems. MDPs looked at this. So in some sense, they actually also look at this. Okay? And then, of course, you can ask the same exactly question here. Which is better? Partial satisfaction goals are better or full satisfaction goals are better? In terms of decision making versus in terms of success. In terms of success, clearly partial satisfaction is better because, you know, you at least live to see another day. If on the other hand, I'm talking about, do you know how to compute the optimal policy for living your semester? It's so much easier if somebody decided that as soon as you as soon as you fail to complete homework, you know, H1, you may as well just drop that course because you failed anyway. There is no struggle in your brain as to whether or not I still have a fighting chance. Okay? And so full satisfaction, essentially somebody else carefully set the reward metric and said you must either get all of it or nothing. So it turns out decision making is easier here and it becomes harder here, even though success is higher here. Right? And then these two we have seen till now. You agree? Right? These two you have seen till now. Deterministic and full satisfaction is normal classical planning. You know, 471 people have seen that, but it's just basic graph search. Okay? And then we actually saw stochastic and reward metrics, which are essentially kind of quite general goal methods, and then stochastic dynamics. That's what MDP did. Okay? Up to that state, now I'm going to throw in an extra dimension. Now notice first of all that I put these orthogonal dimensions because I can have deterministic dynamics and partial satisfaction problems. I don't necessarily have to go all the way to stochastic dynamics just to get reward matrix, for example. I can have deterministic MDPs, which are much simpler than stochastic MDPs. Okay? So I can pick here, and I have a problem. In doing these two, I had always assumed that the observability was full. Observability was full. Okay? Now I play with the observability. So observability also full, none, partial. Okay? And the interesting thing, of course, is you have thought about it before, and today we will look more into details about observability and how it makes life harder. But again, I want you to understand that these are three independent dimensions. You can have deterministic, fully observable, full satisfaction. That is classical planning. Okay? And you can have stochastic, fully observable reward matrix. That is classical MDP. In fact, classical MDP, given that I'm using this NORMDP and POMDP, classical MDP should be called FOMDP. FOMDP. By the way, there's a cute name in English for these. These are called retronyms. That means you came up with a concept which had a nice name to begin with, and then you came up with another concept because of which you have to go back and change the name of this old concept. Okay? Ovens used to be called ovens before microwave ovens were discovered. And so then we now have to go and say normal ovens are called conventional ovens. And similarly, cameras used to be cameras until digital cameras came. Now we have to go back and say film cameras versus digital cameras. Similarly, MDPs used to be MDPs because they just went with fully observable before. But then the moment you talk about the more general idea, POMDPs, now you have to come back and say MDPs. What we call MDPs are FOMDPs, fully observable MDPs. Okay. So you are basically, so you can pick any of them, any of here, any of here. In terms of, if I just keep, let's say, so in the discussion today, I'll mostly be focusing on this. Okay? And I will consider this axis while considering partial observability. But if I don't say anything, deterministic is the simplest case. Partial observability can be hard even if you have deterministic actions. Partial observability essentially means you don't know which state you are in. Okay? And when you don't know which state you are in, you don't know initial state. You don't know the initial state. If you have a deterministic action, and if you know the initial state and you have a deterministic action, then you know all the states after that. But partial observability means you don't even know where you started from. Because of which, even if the action is deterministic, you will still have uncertainty in your world. And if your action is non-deterministic, you'll have even more uncertainty. It just keeps growing. One interesting question that we'll talk about right next slide is if you're talking about observability. So if you do actions, how do they change what is their effect on the uncertainty over state? So basically, this gives you what is called state uncertainty. You don't know where you are. Okay, so you started from an initial state which can be any of S1 to S15. Now I do an action. What happens to my state uncertainty? Does it always increase? Does it always reduce? Will it remain the same? When does it happen?
Depends on if it's a deterministic, it should go down.
If it is deterministic, then?
It should go, uncertainty should go down.
Go down, will always go down, or will it be less than or equal to?
Less than.
Less than or equal to is what he says. So deterministic, it will never go up. But it goes down. Why does it go down?
We know the next table.
What?
We know the next stage because it's deterministic action. We know the initial stage.
Yeah, but
No.
but that's the actually
You
that's how many people think this? I mean, so
No.
so he said if you have uncertainty as to which state you are in, that you may be in S1 or S2 or S3, and you need an action. It's a deterministic action. Then he says the uncertainty can either remain the same or reduce. As far as we are concerned, uncertainty essentially means, if you assume in the beginning we'll assume non-determinism. That means no information about the probabilities of the states are given. Okay, then you had S1, S2, S3 before. Now the next state that you get should be either S1, S2, either something that's 3 long or even less than 3. That's what you're saying. And you are saying the reason that happens is because
We know the initial state as well.
you don't know the initial state. If you know the initial state, here is the interesting point. If you know the initial state, partial observability has no meaning. In fact, this is a good point because there is a question that there's a technical question that people always ask themselves as to whether the so-called classical planning, the easy case, it's deterministic, it's full satisfaction, but is it full observability or no observability? I say it's full observability. But if you separate initial state from every other state, and you only say observability is about the other states that you encounter, and I always give you a single initial state, there is no difference between full versus no observability. Did you understand what I'm saying? Because in classical planning, since the actions are deterministic, if I know the state I am in, I can close there is no such thing as execution monitoring in classical planning. Because you know exactly how the world is supposed to work. And if you know the state, you know the action, you know the next state. You don't need to look at it. You have proved it in your head, and it must be so. Do you see what I'm saying? And so that's why, in fact, some people think classical planning really corresponds to full satisfaction, no observability. That's thankfully a minority. It's more reasonable to think of it as full satisfaction, full observability, full dynamics. That means deterministic dynamics. And observability starts from the initial state. And you don't know what your initial state is. Okay? And if there is no uncertainty in the initial state, then essentially it just becomes a special case. In that special case, it becomes classical planning. So I still need a situation as to why, if I do a deterministic action, I reduce the uncertainty. Yes?
So from each state you think you're in, there's exactly one state that you may be in after executing that action.
Yeah.
And it may reduce because those states may overlap with other states that you
So
may.
the action will define a function on the initial state to the next state. So and that function, the domain will be always less than the.
So that you will never ever forget this, I want you to remember the bomb in the toilet problem. Okay? So you apparently go into this toilet, and there are no toilet humor really, but there are 2 identical looking packages. One of them has a bomb. The other doesn't have a bomb. Okay? And you not only want to do your business, but you also want to actually be safe while doing so. And so you need to de-arm the bomb. There's only one action you have, which is you can flush any package. This is one of these industrial strength flushes. Okay? And you can flush any package, and once it flushes, it's not your problem, it's somebody else's problem. You are safe. Right? Now in the case of bomb in the toilet problem, initial state, bomb in package 1 or bomb in package 2. It's not bomb in package 1 and bomb in package 2. It's bomb in package 1 or bomb in package 2. Okay? And I only have one action, which is flush action. Can I reach safe state? And if you need to think a lot, then you shouldn't go to Afghanistan and places like that, because clearly you can reach a state. What did you do? You essentially just threw both of them into the toilet. Right? And then you will still reach safe state. Okay, now there is a different thing which I can do. Maybe suppose I also have another action apart from this flushing action. There's another action where, I just need to, there may be a bomb in this room. There are multiple packages there. I'm not really sure whether there's a bomb in this room or not. I basically am worried that somebody else will come into this room and will get killed. I have my own big bomb, and I can bomb this room. Then nobody else will get killed. You know, at the risk of becoming very political, that's what we did to Iraq. Right? We did not know whether there was a bomb or not, but after that there was no bomb, for sure. Because there is a lack of country too. But the point is, actions can reduce uncertainty because I can have S1, S2, S3. I may have, let's say, a bomb action. After S1, you'll get to S infinity. After S2, you will still get into S infinity. After S3, you will still get into S infinity. That's what that action is. It is applicable in every state, and it will take you to the after bombing state, which I call S infinity. It reduces the uncertainty.
But this doesn't reduce it. It makes us equal.
It reduces the uncertainty. So here is my situation, right? Okay, let's think of something less violent. I want to clean this table. I don't know how many things are there. Last I checked, there are a couple of pens here, there's something here, there's something here. I want to clean. It's a constructive thing. Shh.
Yeah.
It cleaned. I don't really care what all fell. Right? For sure the table is clean. That's what they're doing actually as we speak. The Secret Service is in wherever the debate is going to happen tonight, which all of you probably will be watching. Secret Service went through and combed the place and de-armed it. They didn't know where bad things are there. They just cleaned the whole place. That's all. Right? So when you take an action, you can reduce the uncertainty of the state in general. If the action has uncertainty in itself, then your uncertainty can increase. But if your action is deterministic, it can never increase. Do you see that? Okay, so with the partial observability, by doing actions, I can reduce uncertainty, and this becomes actually quite useful. I'm doing this whole discussion just on the board today, but it becomes very useful because sometimes you need to know where you are before you can make progress. I probably mentioned this in the beginning of the class that if you wake up in the middle of the night in some strange place and you need to go to the bathroom and you don't quite have your bearings as to where the bathroom is with respect to where you are sleeping and it's pitch dark, one reasonable thing to do is go, walk until you reach a wall and then follow the wall until you reach a door. Right? And then hope that it's actually a bathroom. But, the point being that there is a way where you actually, there may have been, if you had full observability, you would just go direct. But since you don't have full observability, you essentially first, did actions to reduce the state uncertainty and then did actions to reach the goal. Do you understand what I'm saying? Normally we do actions to just reach the goal, closer to the goal. And sometimes actually if I'm here and the wall is here and the bathroom is there, I'm first reaching the wall, so I'm going far away from the goal state. And here this is progress, because here I understand I'm here, but I don't know that because I don't know where my state is. Okay, so partial observability makes life very interesting in terms of first you need to estimate your state, and state estimation itself becomes a problem. And there's a lot of research, a lot of literature. For example, robots have to localize themselves. In the good old days when there was no GPS, right? Robots have to localize themselves. And I'll show you actually, for example, since I'm saying this, I'll show you a little simple video. This is cute. Yeah. There. So here is a robot. It actually, when it started, when it started, okay, when the robot starts, you'll see the red points basically means it thinks it's in any of those places in that particular room. Okay, and as it makes action, as it takes steps, it has sonar, okay? The sonar will tell it some information about where the walls are, where the ghostly walls are, where the real walls are, etc., etc. And as it walks, it localizes itself. It basically reduces the amount of state uncertainty. If the robot decides not to move from where it is, it will never know where it is, unless it has a really rich uncle which tells it, this is the GPS coordinate of your place. And even now in robotics, actually, localization is a big issue, because while we do have GPS outside, you go into something like a mine, you don't have GPS, right? Then you still need to do actions to figure out where you are. And as part of doing these actions, anytime you do an action, you can fall off a cliff. And yet, if you decide not to do actions, you'll never know where you are. If you don't know where you are, you don't know where you need to go, how you need to go to where you want to go. Okay? So anyway, so here's a little thing which just shows that the robot is moving around. And notice as it is moving, the uncertainty, this is basically the number of red dots are all the places where it thinks it is. And that just reduces. And acute places up until here, even as it is reaching into this, it thinks it's either in this room or in this room.
Yeah.
We can see where it is, but it doesn't know. But as soon as it comes up to that point, it realizes that room, according to its map, has this rhombus-like thing. This room doesn't, so I must be in this room. It had to take those many actions before it even knew where it is. Do you see what I'm saying? This is because of partial observability. If the robot has full observability, then it didn't have to walk around to figure out where it is. If you have GPS, robot is given full observability. Most robotics work has been done in the past with buried cable robots. Robots will be walking around in the hospitals, and you clearly don't want robots to moving on to patients who are already in considerable pain. So they essentially, when there was no GPS, they had buried cables which will localize the robot as to where it is. You know this, but how do you connect it to what we are learning? It's basically positional uncertainty, the state estimation, which is not a problem up until today, when you started having uncertainty in observation. You have to make sure that you realize that even if you have uncertain actions, if you have a good pair of eyes, there is no uncertainty in your state. I know where I am. I do this action. I don't yet know where I will be, but when I get there, I'll know where I am. Partial observability, that's not it. Okay? Now, so this is kind of a summary of a whole bunch of issues about partial observability that I'm going to go through. But since I have this picture, tell me before I move on, if everything else remains constant, where would the hard problems be in terms of, where would the success be higher and where would the decision making be harder?
In terms of?
So suppose, let's say I basically assume this doesn't even exist, okay? And then let's assume I'm just in deterministic world. Okay? Would I rather be getting full observability, partial observability, or no observability? If I want to increase my success, the success is highest with full, lowest with none.
Yes.
Right? Okay? But if you want to do optimal decision making, where is the difficulty of decision making highest? Partial. Think of rear view mirrors. If they did not put rear view mirrors in your car, anytime you feel like changing the lane, you can change it. Because you know that you would not know what the heck is going on behind you. Nobody expects you to look behind. You already put all your apartment possessions in the back of your car, so you possibly can't look like this, right? So because you have a rear view mirror, you get partial observability. Why is it partial? Because you have something called the blind spot for driving. If the car is sort of between somewhere here and here, you will never see it in the rear view mirror. Right? And so what do? you need to actually keep following the other lane for the last few seconds, or take the extra action of looking like this and clicking your neck before you change the lane. If you don't and you say, hey, look, there was nothing in the rear view mirror and I changed the lane, you shouldn't put me in jail, they will still say, sorry, we will put you in jail because you have been given a brain, you're supposed to use it. Believe it or not, our life, most of the time we go to jail because, believe it or not, they tell you even in the end that you didn't use the brain you were given. That's it, right? I mean, bad driving is what? I just did not use the brain for a while. I felt texting is more interesting now than, going through the rural intersection. And, things can happen, but people don't take that. There is an expectation from the society that we are all supposed to use our brain to a minimal level. Now, not all of us have to solve the Fermat's last theorem, but, this much of expectation is there. So, really, if they didn't give you the rear view mirror, they could have put you in jail for, changing lanes and in arbitrary fashion. And when you have rear view mirror and you want to make optimal decision, you need to do a harder policy, which is actually follow the back lane for enough amount of time, or do an extra action to make sure where you are, to localize yourself, to know actually where you are. So partial observability is harder decision-making problem. It's higher success. If you don't have rear view mirror, you won't be put in jail, but you probably won't live long anyway. Right? Because a few times later, you would actually get a big accident. Okay? So the hard parts are always in the middle. That's kind of nice to know. And then so then you can ask yourself, if I have stochastic and partial observability, which is what real world is,
Hardest.
that would also be the hardest decision-making problem. So before the fall break comes, if you survive next week with the PalmDP discussion, then you have survived the hardest decision-making algorithm. Really. Because PalmDP reasoning is optimal PalmDP policy construction is probably one of the most difficult algorithms you will read about in this class. Okay? But when it's happening, remember this. You're learning this so that you can actually do optimal decision. One other thing with this picture I want to say is the following. None is one type of situation, but actually I want to split partial observability into stochastic and categorical. No, actually I would split the noisy and categorical. Okay, so basically partial observation, essentially you'll see that it tells you an observation about the state you might be in. Okay, for example, you may not know the name of the state. If you know the name of the state, it's fully observable. You get some features of the state. For example, you say, oh, I think that person was wearing a red shirt. Okay, so that's basically. Now then, essentially, I would say all the suspects who were not wearing red shirts on that day are no longer suspects. Right? If you don't have color blindness. If you have color blindness or you have bad eyesight, then there is a probability that you saw something like magenta and thought that is red. Or if you have lack of vocabulary like me, I don't know how many different colors and the same things. I mean, if you go to these palettes, then they have millions of colors and they all look red to me and they have names, So I'll say red for every one of them, for example. Okay, and then basically I have a noisy observation. For professionals, red means a specific red. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, if I have noisy sensors, that is really the most interesting case of partial observability. Okay, remember, I think I mentioned in this class, right, that Google car had the plastic thing going in front of them, and they thought that just looked like a deer flying in front of the car. That's basically noisy observation. Right? So what happens, we'll see in a minute, basically we are talking about these probabilities. Probability that you'll get an observation O when you are in state S. That's what's called the observation model. Okay? If you have perfect sensors, then it's either 1 or 0. Either you get it or you don't get it. If you have imperfect sensors, then PO given S is some number between 0 less than P less than 1. Right? And furthermore, this noisiness, which involves probabilities, is different from this noisiness, which involves effectors. I can pick stochastic here and categorical here. So I have a robot which has wobbly wheels, perfect sonar, but doesn't have a good touch sensor. So because it doesn't have a good touch sensor, it still has incomplete state information. Right? It can't tell whether it is RAW or a wooden replica of RAW, because the only way it can tell that is to touch, and then it can't tell the difference. But whenever it says RAW, that thing, whatever that thing is, it's wearing red shirt, it has perfect camera, so it is red for sure. So anybody who is not wearing red, you can remove from consideration. You see what I'm saying? You can have incomplete but perfect sensors. You can have complete but imperfect sensors. And you can have incomplete but incomplete sensors. Incomplete but and imperfect sensors. And to make our life simple, we will consider stochastic and noisy sensors, which is what POMDP is. So essentially you consider incomplete sensing and imperfect sensing together, which is as general as it gets in this spectrum. But rather than go directly there, all these other problems are reasonable problems. You can say deterministic actions and observability varies. Okay? Stochastic actions and observability varies, but not noisy, but categorical. So those are interesting problems too. And we'll look at some of them. There was some question from somebody. Yes?
So you have written there that the probability of the sensor having noise is dependent upon the state?
Yeah, basically the observation depends on the, I just hope so, right? Because
so is it the observation depends on the state, or is it dependent on the quality of the sensor?
no, it is basically the quality of the sensor is introduced in this probability. If it is 1 and 0, okay, then essentially it's a categorical sensor. So so you're talking about a different issue, which is this sensor gives, well, no, actually, the probabilities that I'm writing here, 1 and 0, these are from experience. I've looked at this sensor, I played with this sensor enough number of times, and I am telling you that if it is in state S and it gives an observation O, then there is no uncertainty about it. It's for sure that observation is true in that state. Okay, your worry is, I advertise myself as a good sensor, but I'm a noisy sensor. That's a problem. That is a problem, and in fact, all sorts of interesting adversarial scenarios can be constructed that way too, where people will give you badly sensed information. Again, any of you have seen enough Seinfeld episodes. There is this episode where George sees somebody's girlfriend kissing a horse, but he thinks that the horse is somebody whose face looks like a horse. So it was a noisy observation. And of course, it kills their relationship. That's a different story. But anyway, so it's categorical versus noisy observations. Okay? Now, having put all that thing, then I go to this. And so agent doesn't, if you have partial observability, agent doesn't know where its current state is. And this is orthogonal to the determinism or non-determinism of the action. And then the search then becomes in the space of
Set of states.
Belief states. Belief states in the most general sense are distributions over states. Okay, but if in fact you have non-deterministic scenarios, that means, for example, you have categorical observations, then the state probability can either be 1 or 0, not in between. So then, basically, if the state probability is 1 or 0, then you can essentially know which are the, in fact, in the case of so you essentially know which are the states that are more than 0 probable. And those are the only ones that you'll have to consider. You won't actually consider the likelihood of being in each of the states differently. Okay? So the belief state representation is, if you have states S1 to Sn, a belief state is a subset of these states. And if there are n states, there are 2 power n subsets of them. And if you assume that the state representation was in terms of state variables, then you had V variables, which meant you had 2 power V states, which means you have 2 power V belief states. That's like the first thing you realize, that even in the case of non-determinism, the state space explodes. It becomes exponentially larger. That's the price you pay for not having, sensing, or not having full sensing. And if you have distributional information as, basically like in form DPs, then essentially the belief state has a distribution in terms of, this state is probability 0.3, this is probability 0.1, etc., and they all add up to 1. Now, if you have distributional information, how many different belief states can you have?
An infinite number?
Infinite number. Because even if I just have 2 states, S1 and S2, okay, then I basically need to find 2 real numbers between 0 and 1 whose sum adds up to 1. There are infinite such numbers. So belief state representation is always infinitely large. That's another reason to see why somehow stochastic will be sort of dealing with a harder problem in some sense. Okay. Now, how does the state uncertainty get resolved? So you start with uncertain state. How does the state uncertainty get resolved? Now you might ask, why do I need to resolve the uncertainty? Well, that depends. If you have goals to reach, if you need to reach a set of states which have certain properties, then you better be sure that the state that you reach has that property. Okay, how does the state uncertainty get resolved? By actions. If you do actions, uncertainty resolves. Okay, and also by observations. If you do an observational action, that also, observations are considered not actions in this kind of formalism, but observations also reduce uncertainty. Even if you just have partial observations such as sonar information, etc., that reduces uncertainty in the state. Those are the 2 ways uncertainty is reduced. Okay. Now, in terms of observations, what do they do? If I am in a belief state, remember that I already said a belief state is a subset of states. So let's say S1, S2, and S3 is my belief state. Okay. Suppose I basically got an observation just now. So I know that I'm in one of these states. I don't know which state I'm in. But I got the observation O. For now, let's assume non-noisy observations. That means if I got observation O, I know that observation O came. Okay. Not only that, and also I have my sensor model, or observation model. And the sensor model basically will tell me what is the probability of O given S1, what's the probability of O given S2, what is the probability of O given S3. For every state, actually, that's what a sensor model is supposed to tell me. This is part of the information that sensor gives me. Let's say this is 1, this is 0, this is 1. Okay? Then what is my state right now?
S1 or S3.
What? My state is S1, S3. Right? So it cut down the belief state. Now, think in the following way. So, this is what happens when I'm actually executing the plan. And I got to a point in the plan where I know my best expectation is that I'm in either S1 or S2 or S3 according to my plan. And hey, I'm getting this observation. Oh, that means I must be in S1 or S3. S2 is not a possibility. Okay. If I am doing planning, I'm thinking what's going to happen during the execution. So all I would say is, okay, so I will get to that place and I will do an observation. Now when you say I will do an observation, you can't tell what the observation will tell you. Right? For example, you don't know, so for example, there's a movie that you wanted to go to, it's in, either playing in movie theater 1 or movie theater 2. So your best idea is, hopefully you basically observe, so you kind of ask Google, where is it playing? And based on that, I'll go there. That's my plan. Okay, but my complete plan has to say, ask Google. Google will, if Google says theater 1, then drive to theater 1. If it says theater 2, then drive to theater 2. I can't just say, I already have a plan to drive to theater 1, so I'll just hope that Google will say theater 1. Do you see what I'm saying? So during planning, the observation actually splits your belief state. It just partitions the belief state. During execution, observations shrink the belief states. During planning, observations only partition them. Nothing just goes away. So you thought you are in either S1, S2 or S3, and in the planning time, you can ask yourself, if I were to do an observation, what will happen? Well, after the observation, I will know that either I'm in S1, S3, or I am in just S2. I will know which one I am in. And if I then know how to go from either of these to the goal, then I have a plan. And furthermore, it is a tree plan, because it asks a sensing question. Based on the answer, it knows what to do to get to the goal. Does it make sense? Okay, so the point to understand is observation during execution reduces uncertainty. Observation during planning splits the uncertainty into the search space. It partitions the uncertainty into the search space. So you now get an AND branch. Because you can't assume when I ask that it will tell me I'm here. It might either tell me I'm here or tell me I'm here. And then I need to know, if I'm here, what do I do to get to the goal state? If I'm here, what do I do to get to the goal state? If I got both of these to the goal states, then I have a plan. Otherwise, I only have wishful thinking. Yes?
So if we treat the observation as the action, so it looks like we can transform the deterministic into non-deterministic problem.
If you treat observation as an action, then, you're talking about compiling it. You are thinking of observation as sort of a non-deterministic problem. No. So here's the question. So that's a good point. Hold on to that. I'm going to take these out, okay? So this you understood. Now, suppose I am in state S1, S2, S3. This basically means I don't know which one I am in. I'm in one of them. Okay? And I do action A1. A1 is like this. If you do A1 in S1, if you do A1, you get S5 or S6. I don't know which one. Okay? And if I do A1 in S2, nothing happens. I'll just remain in S2. And if I do A1 in S3, I will get S9 or S10. You're listening, right? This is information that's given to me as part of the action specification. So this action is non-deterministic, but it's deterministic for some states and non-deterministic for other states. But so overall it's non-deterministic. My question is, if I were to do action A1, what's my next state?
It's a belief state.
It is going to be S5, S6, S2, S9, S10. Whereas if I do the observation action that you told me, that would split the state into two parts. One which is S1 and S3, the other which is S2. You see the difference? This one, uncertainty is still there. It's not been split into branches. Here it's been split into branches. What this tells you is if you are doing belief state search and you have no observations, that means you can't see. But you may have either deterministic or non-deterministic actions. Then the search, the solution is going to be just a sequence of actions. Because you will never split a state into two different states. Did you get that? So if you have an action which is non-deterministic in the space of states, it acts as if it is deterministic in the space of belief states. Because after the action, you know the new belief state. There's only a single new belief state, not two, exactly one. So if I search directly in the belief states, I'm just searching in a hugely bigger graph instead of instead of a graph of s number of vertices. Now I'm searching in a graph of 2 power s number of vertices. But it's just finding a path in that graph, a single path. Whereas if I have observations, I don't have a simple graph. I have an and/or graph. And I'm trying to find a subgraph as a solution. In one case, I'm finding a path as a solution. In another case, I'm finding a subgraph as a solution. That's a very good question, but I hope you understood my answer. I mean, all of you, not just him. Okay? Essentially, if you just, in some sense, if you only have non-determinism, then, if you only have non-deterministic actions and no sensing actions at all, then, it's called actually conformant planning problem. And some people actually call it nonsense planning problem. I may have mentioned this. Because it's a nonsensical planning problem, where you are supposed to solve the problem without knowing anything about the state. However, you can sometimes solve such problems. Right? Bomb in the toilet is a case in point. I have no observation, I still solve the problem. And it turns out conformant planning is just graph search in a bigger graph. Whereas if I have observational actions, then it's a graph search. It's a subgraph search in a bigger graph. And if I have full observability, then it is subgraph search in just the small graph, the S, the normal state graph. Okay? So observations, basically the important thing to understand is states give out percepts that can be observed, and these can be either categorical or noisy. Observations essentially should be seen as modifying state distribution, essentially. If you do the observation at runtime, then it just changes the distribution. You had a distribution you had, after the observation it changes the distribution. That's what that robot was doing. It has a uniformly distributed red dots. As it did actions, as part of actions, it's also getting extra observations. I mean, the best that it could have done is, I'll just sit here, you tell me where I am. That's an observation action too. That's binding observation action. Please tell me where I am. And then I'll tell you where you are, and then you know where your state is. But most of the time, to even observe yourself, observe where you are, you need to do some actions. You need to do some actual moving around. And then as part of the moving around, you're getting information about where you are now. And one of the interesting things, by the way, about that problem, one of the interesting things about that problem is, at the beginning, robot did not know where it was, right? Somewhere at 3/4 of the way, it knew it went into this particular, room. Now, you can ask the robot, where do you think you are to begin with? Right? It knows now. Yeah. It knows now.
Yeah, because the steps.
Right? That's the beauty of this problem. Actually, I should mention that also. Just from the observations, you get this state estimation problem. So basically, the state estimation problem allows you, actually it's written here, okay? So once you have this, then there are, first of all, because you have partial observability, you have to first figure out where you are. the state estimation problem. This was a problem that didn't exist until partial observability came around. Okay, now the state estimation problem basically is saying what state am I currently in? That's called the filtering problem. As you do actions, as you keep getting more and more observations, you filter your distribution through these observations to figure out what the current distribution is. And if the distribution is categorical, then basically you just filter states to see which sets of states you are. And then you can also, now that you know where you are, after doing some of these actions, now that you know where you are, you have a better idea of where you will be if you continue doing the actions you have decided to do. So you have a better idea of predicting the system. And what's probably most interesting is you can tell where you were because you lived long and you did actions. Right? Because that robot in the beginning did not know where it was. But by the time it reached, so again, let me show you that picture. This is what its initial state was. It thought it was anywhere. You and I knew it was here. But by the time it came here, it too knows that I had much higher probability of having started from here than from having started, for example, from here. That's smoothing. You are reinventing past. That's a very bad thing to do apparently in politics, but it's actually a sign of intelligence. Right? You should reinvent your past based on, because you started with zero knowledge. I mean, you started with very little knowledge about where you are, and as you live, you have a better idea as to, what the state distribution is, and when you actually reduce your uncertainty in any state, that effect propagates back, and that reduces uncertainty in the past states too, in your head. And that problem is called the smoothing problem. Okay, all of these are, yes?
It is not necessary that it will be able to identify all the possible states in between, but it will be able to find out the initial state.
No, because if it remembers all the actions it did, then it can recompute all the distributions back. I will, go into more details of smoothing problem, but it's something that you didn't expect will be a big deal because it was not even a problem before, and yet, in fact, a lot of people are interested in this problem in robotics, for example, because you'll do actions just to figure out where you are. There's no goal. I'm just walking around to figure out where I am. And once I know where I am, then I can also know where I was when I started.
So, for example, there is a rhombus, and in both these states, the robot can take same action and reach.
No, if your question is whether I will know for sure where I started from, no. You will have more information about where you started from. Okay, one of the interesting questions is, what's the entropy of your distribution, current belief state distribution? If the entropy of the belief state distribution reduces, then I will say I have more knowledge. Okay? And then come the planning problem. So first this, if you have sensing actions, then you have to deal with this. If you don't have sensing actions, thankfully you don't have to deal with this. Actually you can, because essentially, if you don't have sensing actions, and I tell you if you do this action and this action, what state will you be in? In the bomb in the toilet problem, you will know where you will be. You don't have any observation, you just have the prediction part. And after the prediction part, you figure out what the state distribution would be, and that's the only thing that you know. If you have observations, then you can filter the prediction from that. Okay, and then there are planning problems in this model. One is planning without any sensing. Even if you have sensing actions, you can decide not to use them, or you may not have any sensing actions at all. In that case, you are dealing with this. Belief state, action, new belief state. A single new belief state. That's just conform and plan. It's a hard, bigger graph, but still finding a path in it. Okay. Then the other one is plan with a commitment to use sensing during execution. If you do have sensing actions and you want to use the sensing, then you will have essentially contingency plan. That means you essentially have a plan which itself is a tree, which says I will do this sensing. At the plan time, I'll say in this state, based on the observation I will get during the runtime, I would either be in this belief state or this belief state. And if I'm in this belief state, this is what I will do. If I'm in this belief state, this is what I will do. Okay, now the last thing I will say is I made a huge deal about plan with a commitment to use sensing during execution. Just because you have eyes doesn't mean you'll use them. And where is this most obvious? It's in medicine. There are tests to figure out all sorts of things that you may or may not be suffering from. And if your doctor uses all the tests, then there won't be a doctor tomorrow because their insurance will throw them out. Do you see what I'm saying? So once in a while they'll say, when you go to the doctor, the right thing to do is to figure out whether you have a viral infection or a bacterial infection before giving antibiotic. Figuring that out is costly because it requires a sensing action which is $15, let's say. Writing, take antibiotics is easier. So what will they do? They'll just make you take antibiotics. Locally, that's fine because you don't sue them. In fact, people get to sue the doctors if, in fact, they can later on prove that they did have a bacterial infection and in addition to the viral infection, and the doctor misjudged and they didn't give them antibiotics. So you sue the doctor and the doctor loses practice. So instead the doctor will say, take your antibiotics. And then it's great for the doctor, but for the society right now, there are lots and lots of people for whom no antibiotics work because we messed ourselves up. Okay, so the point is that if you do not do sensing, just because you have a sensing action, that doesn't mean that you will do it because it can be quite costly to do sensing. And if you're talking about cost-based planning, then sometimes not using the sensing action that's been given to you is the right thing to do. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll come back next class and basically transition into quantification.